In a city built on peace, darkness still found a way to knock on every door. A veteran was stabbed in his living room. A woman crushed beneath a minivan in rage. A father slain by his own daughter. And a lover who turned a bridge into a grave. In courtrooms across Ohio, their killers now count decades behind bars, but the lives they took will never return. And this is Inside Cincinnati's Darkest Black Killers, Shocking Murders, and True Crime Documentary. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Mordecai Black. Freedom was supposed to give him a second chance, but instead, it became another man's death sentence. In Cincinnati's over-the-Rhine district, 38-year-old Mordecai Black was a convicted felon under strict parole supervision. After serving 9 years for violent assault and aggravated riot, he was released in January 2025 as a targeted violent offender. Within weeks, he cut off his electronic ankle monitor and vanished. Authorities issued a nationwide warrant, but the local police were never directly notified. For months, Black lived as a fugitive until June 4, when his name returned to the headlines in blood. At 2 a.m. inside the home of Patrick and Sarah Herringer, a quiet neighborhood turned into a crime scene. Patrick, a 46-year-old Army veteran and respected gym owner, was attacked in his own living room after confronting an intruder. Investigators later confirmed that Black broke through the back door armed with a knife, first assaulting Sarah before turning on Patrick as he tried to protect her. The scene revealed chaos, broken glass, overturned furniture, and a trail of blood leading down the hall. Patrick was found with multiple stab wounds, including one to the neck that proved fatal. Detectives from the Cincinnati Police Department began processing the scene before sunrise. The knife used in the murder lay beneath a rug, bearing Black's fingerprints. His clothes, soaked in blood, were recovered inside the home. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses showed him walking toward the residence moments before the break-in, then fleeing covered in blood. Witness statements and forensic evidence created an unbroken chain, leading directly to the suspect. A citywide manhunt ended the next day when officers found Black walking along Vine Street. He offered no resistance and no explanation. In court, he remained expressionless as prosecutors read 14 counts: aggravated murder, felonious assault, burglary, and trespass. Hamilton County Assistant Prosecutor Elise Deters described him as an exceptionally dangerous individual who should never have been free. His defense attorney insisted he was shocked by the charges. Judge Robert Winkler raised his bond from $2.25 million to $5 million, citing extreme danger and risk of flight. The courtroom overflowed with supporters of the Herringer family. Patrick's widow, Sarah, stood before cameras and said, "This isn't just about my husband. This is about a system that failed to protect us." Her words ignited statewide outrage, forcing the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections to revise its policies. From then on, every time a violent parolee cuts off an ankle monitor, local police must receive direct notification, no delays, no excuses. This tragedy serves as more than a headline, it is a warning carved into the system itself. Always stay aware of who lives near you, report any signs of suspicious behavior, and demand accountability when supervision fails. Silence and bureaucracy can be as dangerous as the crimes they overlook. One broken signal allowed a killer to walk free, and it cost an innocent man his life. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Taahviya Chapman. Anger, jealousy, and speed, 3 forces that turned a grocery store parking lot into a crime scene. On the evening of the 31st of August 2022, outside a Kroger in Cincinnati's Spring Grove Village, 24-year-old Taahviya Chapman used her minivan as a weapon. Surveillance cameras captured what prosecutors later described as a deliberate act of violence. The attack left one man dead, another injured, and an entire community stunned by the sheer recklessness of a single decision. According to investigators, Chapman had driven her boyfriend, 26-year-old Jawan Lunsford, to the store. While he was inside, she allegedly went through his phone and discovered messages she believed were between him and her sister. Witnesses reported hearing a loud argument near the entrance as Lunsford tried to walk away. Moments later, Chapman returned to her van, placed their 8-month-old baby in the back seat, and accelerated toward the store at high speed. The dark-colored vehicle struck Lunsford and a bystander, 58-year-old Christopher Griffith, who had been walking toward the doors with his cane. Griffith, who had survived a motorcycle accident years earlier and only recently learned to walk again, was thrown several feet. Lunsford suffered a broken leg. Chapman's van came to rest against the building, its front end crushed. Witnesses say she got out, leaving her infant inside, and began punching Lunsford as he lay injured on the pavement. Good Samaritans restrained her until police arrived. Detectives quickly pieced together the events using witness statements and surveillance footage. The footage showed Chapman circling the parking lot moments before impact, suggesting premeditation. Physical evidence from the scene, along with Chapman's erratic behavior, supported charges of murder, felonious assault, attempted murder, and child endangerment. Her criminal history revealed prior incidents of violence, including arrests for property destruction and child abuse. As news of Griffith's death spread, outrage followed. Hamilton County Prosecutor Joe DeTers described the case as sickening, saying, "Her total disregard for human life is stunning." The court raised her bond from $20,000 to $500,000 after the homicide charge was added. During her hearings, Chapman appeared tense and expressionless, occasionally glancing at the gallery but saying nothing. In June 2023, she accepted a plea deal, admitting guilt to involuntary manslaughter and felonious assault. The judge sentenced her to 18 to 23 years in prison. Griffith's brother, Greg, later said, "She took away someone who had already fought so hard to live." He described his brother as a man of music and perseverance, a sound engineer who had worked with artists from Aerosmith to Prince. This tragedy offered painful lessons about impulse, control, and accountability. Emotional confrontation behind the wheel can destroy lives. Domestic disputes must never unfold in public spaces, and awareness of escalating anger is vital before it turns fatal. Prevention begins long before tragedy strikes. One moment of rage turned a parking lot into a place of mourning, a reminder that anger, once unleashed, leaves no one unharmed. Number 3. Anthony Kirkland. There are crimes that reveal darkness, and then there are those that expose how it survives in plain sight. Anthony Wayne Kirkland, born in 1968 in Cincinnati, Ohio, spent more than half his life entangled with the justice system. His path to becoming one of Ohio's most notorious serial killers began in 1987 when he murdered his girlfriend, 27-year-old Leola Douglas. After she refused to have sex with him, he strangled and burned her body. Kirkland was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 to 25 years. Despite dozens of disciplinary violations behind bars, he was released on parole in 2003. An early decision influenced by a Supreme Court ruling that judged offenders by their conviction title rather than the brutality of their crimes. What followed was a series of killings between 2006 and 2009 that devastated Cincinnati. The victims, one 4-year-old Kaysonia Crawford, 4 5-year-old Mary Jo Newton, 2 5-year-old Kimya Rollison, and 1 3-year-old Esme Kinney, were found in secluded locations, strangled and burned. Kirkland told detectives, "Fire purifies," a phrase prosecutors later described as a cruel excuse for destroying evidence. Each victim represented a pattern of escalating violence against women who had simply crossed his path. The final murder shattered the community. On the 7th of March 2009, Esme Kinney went for an afternoon jog near Winton Road Reservoir. When she accidentally bumped into Kirkland, he snapped. He overpowered her, strangled her with a rag, and set her lower body on fire. Police found him hours later sleeping under a tree, still in possession of Esme's watch and iPod. Nearby, investigators discovered her body hidden under brush, barely recognizable. The scene was described by officers as haunting and unforgettable. The investigation revealed connections to multiple unsolved homicides. Kirkland confessed to 4 murders in a 9-hour statement, describing his crimes in chilling detail. In 2010, a Hamilton County jury convicted him on all counts of aggravated murder, rape, and abuse of a corpse. The jury recommended death, and the judge agreed, calling him the worst of the worst. Appeals followed, and in 2016, the Ohio Supreme Court ordered a resentencing hearing due to prosecutorial misconduct. Yet even after reconsideration, in 2018, the new jury once again returned a death verdict. In court, Esme's aunt called him an evil, remorseless, sadistic murderer. Kaysonia Crawford's grandmother said, "He took something special from us that can never be replaced." The community's grief turned into outrage over how a man with such a violent history had ever been released. This case left deep marks on Ohio's correctional system. It exposed failures in parole supervision, poor oversight of halfway houses, and the consequences of lenient parole rulings. From these tragedies come 3 stark lessons. Violent offenders require vigilant monitoring, rehabilitation cannot replace accountability, and every early release must be treated as a matter of public safety, not paperwork. Some crimes end with punishment, but this one stands as a warning about mercy misapplied and vigilance lost. Number 4. Liscia D. Willis. He survived war and decades on the force, but not the night his own daughter came home. In December 2019, 49-year-old Liscia D. Willis of Forest Park, Ohio, was accused of murdering her father, James Lee Skip Dunlap, a respected former Cincinnati police officer and U.S. Army veteran. Prosecutors alleged that greed drove the crime, that Willis wanted to take over her father's house after killing him. Dunlap, 69, had spent nearly 30 years in uniform, surviving dangerous patrols, only to die in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The scene unfolded on Raphael Place, where police were called for a welfare check late on December 20. Dunlap's wife, out of town visiting relatives, had grown worried after days without hearing from him. When officers arrived around midnight, Willis answered the door. Inside with her girlfriend and 2 teenagers, she claimed everything was fine. But detectives quickly noticed something wrong. There were streaks of blood on the hallway floor and more near the kitchen. As they descended the basement stairs, the smell of decomposition filled the air. At the bottom lay the body of James Dunlap, covered in blankets, dead from a stab wound to the neck. The coroner later ruled his death the homicide caused by hemorrhagic shock. Investigators believe Willis stabbed her father multiple times during an argument and left his body in the basement while she began moving personal belongings into the house. Detectives found evidence that she had attempted to clean parts of the scene, leading to a charge of tampering with evidence. Willis was arrested the following day and charged with aggravated murder. During her arraignment on December 23, she appeared calm, wearing a gray jail jumpsuit, her eyes fixed on the floor as the prosecutor detailed the allegations. Assistant Hamilton County Prosecutor David Wood told the court, "This is someone who could kill their own flesh and blood for money." Her bond was set at $1 million. Her attorney, Clyde Bennett II, challenged the state's theory, insisting that Willis had no criminal history and no motive. The idea that she simply woke up and stabbed her father over a mortgage is asinine, he said, claiming that the home had no mortgage at all and that Willis often stayed there with her father's consent. The courtroom atmosphere was tense. Family members filled the seats, some openly divided, with tempers flaring until deputies intervened. Police officers who had served with Dunlap sat quietly in uniform, some shaking their heads. Cincinnati Police Chief Elliot Isaac described the death as a true tragedy. The case raised uncomfortable questions about family violence and hidden conflicts. It reminded many that danger is not always found in dark alleys but can exist behind familiar doors. To prevent similar tragedies, experts stress recognizing early signs of domestic tension, intervening when communication breaks down, and never ignoring unexplained aggression within families. Silence, in such cases, often precedes catastrophe. A man who once protected a city lost his life where he should have felt safest at home. Number 5. Jonathan Morris. He came back to the place that had fired him, but this time, he brought a gun instead of an apology. Jonathan Morris, a 21-year-old former Taco Bell employee from Cincinnati, returned to the Jest Road restaurant in the early morning hours of the 29th of August 2025. Just one day earlier, he had been let go by his manager, 32-year-old Ryan Johnson, a father of 7 and a respected team leader. Prosecutors described what followed as a cold, deliberate act of vengeance that ended with Johnson dead in the parking lot outside the store. Surveillance footage from that night captured the entire sequence. Johnson, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, stepped outside the restaurant for a late break. The lot was nearly empty, lit only by a few flickering lights from the drive-thru sign. At 12:07 a.m., Morris appeared on camera walking toward him. The two exchanged words. Investigators later said Johnson tried to calm the situation, unaware that Morris was armed. Moments later, multiple gunshots rang out. Johnson collapsed instantly, his phone falling beside him. When police arrived minutes later, they found Johnson's body near the curb. There were no shell casings, an indication that the shooter had used a revolver. Officers cordoned off the lot, marking evidence under the harsh glow of crime scene lights. Blood pooled near a discarded paper cup, and fragments of glass from a vehicle window were collected for testing. Detectives began canvassing nearby buildings, searching for witnesses or additional footage. By dawn, investigators identified Morris as the prime suspect. His name came from employee rosters and witness statements from coworkers who knew about his recent termination. Detectives traced his address to his father's home, where they found his bedroom empty. Over the next 6 weeks, the Cincinnati Police Homicide Unit and Fugitive Apprehension Squad coordinated an intensive search, tracking tips, interviewing relatives, and reviewing bus station footage. The suspect was finally arrested on October 15 after a quiet traffic stop. During questioning, Morris refused to speak. In court the next morning, he appeared tired, expressionless, wearing an orange jail jumpsuit. The prosecutor told Judge Tyrone Yates that Morris had shown an extraordinary disregard for human life, describing Johnson as a man who tried to help the very person who would take his life. The judge set bond at $500,000 straight, ordering house arrest and electronic monitoring if released. Investigators presented strong preliminary evidence, security footage, eyewitness testimony, and ballistics, confirming the use of a small-caliber revolver. Detectives also discovered that Morris had been unemployed and emotionally unstable in the days following his firing, adding context to what they called a premeditated encounter. Although the case is still awaiting trial, the facts revealed by the investigation serve as a warning about workplace anger and unchecked emotion. The smallest conflicts can escalate quickly when pride replaces reason, when retaliation seems easier than restraint, and when a moment's rage becomes irreversible. The parking lot was silent again within minutes, but one life ended, and another was lost to prison walls forever. Number 6. Rodney Hinton Jr. He watched his only son die on a police body cam, then, less than 24 hours later, drove straight into a deputy's path. In May 2025, Cincinnati resident Rodney Hinton Jr., 38, was charged with the aggravated murder of Hamilton County Special Deputy Larry Henderson. Prosecutors say Hinton intentionally used his car as a weapon one day after his son, Ryan Hinton, was shot and killed by police. The case, now one of Ohio's most divisive trials, intertwines grief, rage, and mental collapse. The chain of events began on the 1st of May 2025. Cincinnati police officers responded to reports of a stolen vehicle in East Price Hill. When they approached the car, 4 men fled. Bodycam footage showed Ryan Hinton running between 2 dumpsters as an officer shouted, "He's got a gun." Seconds later, shots rang out. The officer fired 4 times, claiming Ryan had aimed a loaded Glock 40 at him. The teenager died instantly. Police Chief Teresa Theedge later said, the officer feared for his life. It was a 6-second confrontation. The next morning, Rodney and his family were called to the police station to view the footage. Witnesses said he broke down halfway through, sobbing uncontrollably and leaving before the video ended. His relatives drove him home, fearing what he might do. By early afternoon, he returned alone to retrieve his car. What happened next, prosecutors argue, was deliberate. At 1:12 p.m., near the University of Cincinnati, Deputy Larry Henderson, a 57-year-old Marine veteran, was directing traffic for a graduation ceremony. Witnesses reported seeing Hinton's car stop briefly on a hill overlooking the intersection. He looked straight ahead, floored it, and never braked, one bystander told investigators. The vehicle crossed lanes and struck Henderson head-on, launching him several feet into the air. The deputy was pronounced dead at the hospital. Police arrested Hinton at the scene. Prosecutor Ryan Nelson described the act as calculated and premeditated. At his arraignment, the courtroom overflowed with officers. Hinton appeared visibly disoriented, muttering softly and staring at the floor. His attorney, Clyde Bennett II, entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, arguing his client suffered a psychiatric break triggered by trauma. "He's not a cop killer," Bennett said. "He's a grieving father who lost his mind." A court-appointed forensic psychologist diagnosed Hinton with bipolar disorder and psychosis, finding his mental state severely impaired at the time. Under Ohio law, this could make him ineligible for the death penalty. Prosecutors, however, requested a second evaluation, maintaining that his actions showed control and intent. Hinton remains held without bond, receiving treatment while awaiting trial. The tragedy left 2 families shattered. Behind the headlines lie harsh truths. Trauma untreated becomes dangerous. Grief can turn into violence when despair overwhelms reason, and mental illness, if ignored, can blur the line between victim and offender. A man seeking justice for his son instead became the reason another child lost a father. Number 7. Tyrone Hunter. A small red dot flickered across a wall in Winton Hills, and within minutes, a young mother. The tragedy unfolded on the 6th of July 2023. When 6-year-old Isis Liscia Roseman, who was 4 months pregnant, was fatally shot outside her home on Kings Run Court in Cincinnati, Ohio. The man behind the gun was her neighbor, 5-year-old Tyrone Hunter. What began as a minor neighborhood dispute over a laser pointer spiraled into an act of lethal violence that ended 2 lives and ignited outrage across the city. That summer evening, Isis was outside with her younger brother, playing with the laser pointer in their yard. Hunter confronted them, accusing the children of shining the light toward his house. Witnesses recalled his anger escalating as he threatened to shoot up the house before storming off in his car. Minutes later, he returned, this time armed. As the family rushed inside for safety, bullets tore through the walls and windows. One round struck Isis as she stood near a window. Her mother, Trissa Green, recalled the moment her daughter turned to her and whispered, "I got shot," before collapsing. She was rushed to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center but died shortly after arrival. Detectives at the scene recovered shell casings near the curb and confirmed the shots came from outside the home. Surveillance footage from nearby houses matched the timeline of Hunter's vehicle returning to the area shortly before the gunfire. The crime stunned investigators, not only for its senseless nature but for the fact that Hunter should never have been free. At the time of the murder, Hunter was out on bond for 2 prior felony indictments, including felonious assault and drug trafficking. Records revealed that a bail reform organization, the Bail Project, had paid a drastically reduced $10,000 bond after a judge lowered it from the original $105,000. He had been allowed to remove his ankle monitor months before the killing. Prosecutors later called the decision catastrophic. "A dangerous man was let out for $10,000, said Hamilton County Prosecutor Melissa Powers. Now 2 people are dead." Hunter turned himself in weeks later, on July 24, after a murder warrant was issued. He faced 24 charges, including 2 counts of murder and multiple gun offenses. Initially pleading not guilty, he later accepted a plea deal in June 2024, pleading guilty to involuntary manslaughter and unlawful discharge of a firearm. The judge sentenced him to between 20 and 31 years in state prison. For Rosamond's mother, the courtroom provided only partial closure. "He killed my daughter and my grandchild," she said. "That's 2 lives. 20 years isn't enough." This case exposes how small cracks in the justice system can become fatal. Lax bail decisions can unleash violent offenders, ignoring warning signs of escalating anger invites tragedy, and community safety depends on accountability, not convenience. A quarrel over a beam of light ended in permanent darkness for an entire family. Number 8. Omarion Horne. It started as a night of laughter and cards, but ended with a single shot that silenced the room forever. On the 5th of October 2023, 23-year-old Omarion Horne and his friend, 23-year-old Rachel Counts, gathered with a small group inside a Winton Hills home in Cincinnati, Ohio. What began as an ordinary evening quickly turned into a fatal moment of recklessness when, according to prosecutors, Horne suggested a game of Russian roulette. Within minutes, a young woman's life was gone, and a man's freedom soon followed. Prosecutors said that while the 2 were playing cards, Horne pulled out a revolver from his pocket. Witnesses recalled him jokingly asking Counts if she wanted to play a quick game. He emptied the gun's chamber, leaving a single bullet inside. What happened next played out in horrifying sequence. Horne first placed the weapon to his own head and pulled the trigger. It didn't fire. Then, still holding the revolver, he turned toward Rachel. 1 click later, the bullet discharged, hitting her in the chest. The room erupted in chaos. Emergency dispatchers received a call around 10:45 p.m. Police arrived at the Kings Run Court residence to find Counts lying motionless on the floor. Paramedics confirmed her death at the scene. The revolver was recovered nearby. Horne, who remained at the house, appeared in shock, repeatedly telling officers it wasn't supposed to happen. Detectives with the Cincinnati Police Department immediately opened a homicide investigation. The following morning, Horne was arrested and charged with murder, felonious assault, and reckless homicide. During his first court appearance on October 10, he wept uncontrollably as prosecutors described how the shooting unfolded. One courtroom observer noted that Horne cried the entire time, while the judge called it a senseless tragedy born from stupidity. Defense attorney arguments painted the incident as an act of recklessness, not intent. They emphasized that Horne had no prior criminal record, was employed, and had deep roots in the community. They requested bond be set at $100,000, arguing that he posed no flight risk. Prosecutors, however, insisted on stricter conditions given the deadly result. Judge William Mallory ultimately set bond at $1 million, stating, "It's sad that people use a firearm as a toy." As the case advanced toward the grand jury, prosecutors maintained that Horne's decision to pull the trigger, even in jest, met the legal definition of murder under Ohio law. If convicted on all counts, he faces the possibility of life in prison. Rachel's friends described her as joyful, outgoing, and the kind of person who made every room brighter. The tragedy reignited discussions in Cincinnati about gun safety and the cultural normalization of firearms. This case reminds us that a split-second choice can permanently alter countless lives. Guns are not props for curiosity, pride, or thrill. Always treat them as loaded, refuse any game that blurs danger with fun, and step away when alcohol or impulsivity enter the room. One careless trigger pull turned a moment of play into a lifetime of regret. Number 9. Desean Brown. A late-night Uber ride across the Ohio River would expose one of Cincinnati's most haunting crimes in recent memory. Desean Brown, 25, was sentenced to life in prison for the murders of his girlfriend, 29-year-old Taahviya Lattimore, and her son, Nilo. The crimes, committed in December 2020, shattered the city and left investigators piecing together a chilling chain of events. Prosecutors revealed that Brown had been living with Taahviya in her Walnut Hills apartment. Their relationship had deteriorated after Brown allegedly blamed her for a miscarriage he believed she caused. Detectives later determined that resentment grew into a fatal motive. On or about the 5th of December 2020, Brown stabbed Taahviya 11 times in the neck. Her body remained inside the apartment for nearly 5 days, the pool of blood seeping through the floorboards into the unit below. During this time, Brown searched online for ways to clean up blood. The next morning, around 4:30 a.m., he turned his violence toward Taahviya's son, Nilo. Prosecutors said Brown took the boy in his stroller to the Purple People Bridge, overlooking the icy Ohio River, and threw him over the edge while still alive. Nilo's body was never recovered. Days later, Brown ordered a body bag from eBay. On December 11, he summoned an Uber, carrying the heavy bag containing Taahviya's body. He told the driver it was full of his belongings after an argument with his girlfriend. When he tried to dispose of it over the bridge, it caught on a ledge. A security guard discovered it early the next morning, alerting police. Investigators quickly connected Brown to the crime through surveillance footage showing him hauling a large white bag into the Uber. Inside the apartment, forensic teams found traces of bleach and evidence of attempted cleanup. During a 10-hour interrogation, Brown lied repeatedly, claiming he'd spoken to Taahviya after her death. Detectives noted his lack of emotion and later testified that he appeared to fake symptoms of mental illness to delay proceedings. Initially facing the death penalty, Brown eventually pleaded guilty to 2 counts of aggravated murder on the 10th of September 2025 after being deemed competent to stand trial. In exchange for his plea, prosecutors removed capital punishment from consideration, citing the family's wish to avoid prolonged appeals. Judge Melissa Powers sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Brown sat motionless, eyes fixed downward, offering no apology or final statement. In court, Taahviya's father, Roderick Lattimore, addressed him directly. "Go to hell," he said. "You threw my grandson into that river. You don't deserve to walk this earth." The tragedy left Cincinnati reeling, reigniting debate over early detection of domestic violence and mental instability. It underscored 3 painful truths. Never ignore escalating anger in a partner, trust your instincts when fear feels justified, and ensure loved ones have a network of protection before abuse turns irreversible. The Ohio River still runs, but somewhere beneath its current lies a silence that justice cannot fully heal. Number 10. Ronnell Scott. A quiet October afternoon turned deadly when music, pride, and anger collided in a small Ohio neighborhood. On the 22nd of October 2022, 20-year-old Treshawn A. Smith stood with friends near the fountain at Elm Street and West Wyoming Avenue in Lockland, laughing and talking about his next rap project. Moments later, a car slowed near the group. A single shot rang out, striking Smith in the head. He fell instantly, surrounded by chaos and disbelief. What seemed like a random drive-by shooting was, investigators say, the final act of a feud born from a rap video, one that blurred the line between music and menace. Prosecutors later identified the suspected shooter as 24-year-old Ronnell Scott. The 2 men belonged to rival circles in Cincinnati's underground rap scene. Each group recorded videos online, throwing verbal jabs at the other. According to Hamilton County Prosecutor Connie Pillock, Smith's lyrics were viewed as disrespectful by the opposing group. She called the killing senseless, adding, "Nothing, especially a perceived slight in a rap video, is worth killing over." Smith's mother, Evie, explained that her son's video had been recorded months before the feud even began. "It wasn't about anyone," she said, "but it was just taken personal." On the day of the shooting, Smith had been spending the afternoon with friends when Scott allegedly spotted him. Witnesses said Scott drove by, extended his arm, and fired a single bullet before fleeing the scene. The Hamilton County Sheriff's Office launched an investigation that stretched more than 2 years. Detectives conducted dozens of interviews, examined social media posts, and traced the network of retaliatory threats exchanged online. Through persistent detective work, they connected Scott to the crime. In April 2025, nearly 3 years after the shooting, Scott was indicted on charges of aggravated murder, purposeful murder, felony murder, and felonious assault. Despite the indictment, Scott has not been captured. A warrant remains active for his arrest. He's still out here, Evie said in a trembling voice. I do fear for me and my family's safety because he hasn't been caught. For her, the indictment brought little peace. Justice remained unfinished. At the courthouse, Prosecutor Pillock called the act a tragedy rooted in pride, while detectives described the investigation as one of their most emotionally taxing. Lockland residents gathered in vigils near the site of the shooting, lighting candles under murals of Smith's smiling face. Many described him as a talented young man whose dream was to make music that lifted people up, not tear them down. The case has become a sobering reminder of how quickly digital conflicts can become deadly. Words that start as entertainment online can mutate into real-world rage. The lessons are clear. Never let pride dictate your response. Disengage when conflict escalates online, and remember that walking away can be an act of survival. When beats turn into bullets and songs into sorrow, the silence that follows reminds us art should heal, not harm. Each story you've heard tonight hides deeper layers still waiting to be uncovered, motives unexplored, justice unfinished, lives forgotten beneath headlines. If you think you've seen the worst, you haven't. The next case will challenge everything you believe about guilt, innocence, and the thin line between them. So before you leave, make sure to subscribe to Justice Reversed, hit the notification bell, and be among the first to witness the next chilling chapter.